In 2003, just months after the Columbia disaster shook NASA to its core, the agency unveiled an ambitious plan. A school bus-sized spacecraft powered by a nuclear reactor that would generate more electricity than all previous planetary missions combined. The Jupiter Icy Moons Orbiter would be so powerful, it could hop between Jupiter's moons like a hummingbird, sipping nectar from flower to flower, searching for alien life in subsurface oceans. 2 years later, it was dead, canceled to fund another program that would also be canceled. This is the story of how NASA resurrected a Cold War dream, only to watch it die the exact same death, proving that some lessons are never learned. The question isn't whether we can build a nuclear spacecraft. It's whether we can ever escape the gravitational pull of our own politics long enough to actually launch one. Picture this. It's 2003, and while the nation mourns Columbia, a small team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is sketching plans for a spacecraft that would make the Apollo program look quaint. They're not just designing a machine to visit Jupiter's moons. They're designing one that will move in with them. They called it the Jupiter Icy Moons Orbiter, and on paper, it was magnificent. At 20,000 kilograms fully fueled, imagine 4 full-grown elephants strapped to a rocket. JIMO would be one of the most massive planetary spacecraft ever conceived. A flying laboratory powered by something NASA hadn't touched in 3 decades, a nuclear reactor. But not the plutonium batteries that had powered Voyager and Cassini with their modest hundreds of watts, barely enough to run a few light bulbs. No, this was a full-fledged fission reactor generating between 100 and 200 kilowatts of electrical power. Enough to run a small neighborhood. Enough to power a high school. Orders of magnitude more than any previous deep space mission, all focused on a single audacious goal, answering whether we're alone in the universe. Because here's what drove Charles Alaki and his team at JPL forward. The National Academy of Sciences had made it clear that Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto weren't just frozen rocks. They harbored subsurface oceans, liquid water, potential habitats for life. And reaching them, really studying them, exceeded the capabilities of any solar-powered mission humanity could build. Think about it this way. Jupiter orbits 5 times farther from the Sun than Earth does. That means sunlight there is 25 times weaker. Not 5 times, but 5 squared. Solar panels that could power a spacecraft in Earth orbit become as useful as a flashlight in a cave. You're working in permanent twilight, trying to run a flying laboratory that needs to operate for a decade without maintenance, in the most hostile radiation environment in the solar system. Solar power wasn't just impractical, it was impossible. This is where JIMO became something more than a spacecraft. It became a hummingbird designed to sip nectar from 3 different flowers in the deadliest garden in the solar system. The nuclear reactor would feed high-power ion engines with a delta VI budget exceeding 10 kilometers per second. That's over 22,000 miles per hour of maneuvering capability. Enough to perform unprecedented orbital gymnastics, spiraling from moon to moon like a cosmic ballet dancer, each movement precise, each destination months of intensive study. Scientists like Robert Pappalardo envisioned a mission that wouldn't just fly by these worlds at 30,000 miles per hour, stealing a few precious hours of data like a thief in the night. JIMO would actually orbit each moon, spending months, perhaps years, mapping their ice shells with penetrating radar, measuring their magnetic fields with sensitive magnetometers, analyzing their surface compositions with spectrometers operating across infrared, ultraviolet, and visible wavelengths. Every wavelength of light would become a different pair of eyes, each one revealing secrets invisible to the others. The planned operational phase stretched 6 to 8 years in the Jovian system itself. 6 to 8 years of continuous science, of daily discoveries, of watching these alien worlds transform from fuzzy telescope dots into places we could know as intimately as we know our own moon. The data rates, 10 to 50 megabits per second, enabled by all that nuclear-generated power, would return several terabits of science data. To put that in perspective, that's more data than Galileo collected in its entire 14-year mission, delivered every few months. Every instrument, every system, every line of code was designed around a single premise: that with unlimited power, humanity could finally answer whether we're alone. The engineers weren't just building a spacecraft. They were building a key to unlock doors we'd been staring at for decades. On paper, JIMO was perfect. The reactor would provide unlimited power. The ion engines would provide unlimited maneuverability. The instruments would provide unlimited science. But there was a problem that everyone knew, but few wanted to acknowledge. NASA had tried this before. In the 1960s, Project Nerva developed nuclear rocket engines that worked perfectly. Then Congress killed the program anyway. The engineers pushing JIMO forward were either unaware of this history or believed things would be different this time. They were wrong. Here's what the glossy mission brochures didn't show: the late-night meetings where engineers admitted they didn't know if their reactor could survive a decade in deep space. The simulations that kept showing the high-voltage systems arcing in ways that could fry the entire spacecraft. The growing realization that they were trying to build a nuclear power plant that could fly. Jupiter's radiation environment is a monster. Imagine standing next to an industrial X-ray machine, the kind they use to inspect welds and steel beams, except it's running continuously, and you can never turn it off or step away. Now imagine that machine is the size of a planet. That's Jupiter's magnetosphere. Magnetic fields and particle belts so intense they make Earth's Van Allen belts look like a gentle breeze. The Galileo spacecraft, which orbited Jupiter from 1995 to 2003, was heavily shielded and still barely survived, its electronics slowly degrading with each orbit like a fighter taking body blows round after round. JIMO's designers knew they'd need unprecedented shielding, thick aluminum vaults to protect the avionics, radiation-hardened electronics that had never been tested at this scale. But shielding was only half the problem. That nuclear reactor, churning out 100 to 200 kilowatts of continuous power, would generate waste heat that had to go somewhere. The solution? Deployable radiators capable of rejecting over 100 kilowatts of thermal energy. Imagine keeping a steel mill cool without air conditioning in the coldest part of winter, except there's no air at all and you're 500 million miles from the sun. In space, you can't use fans or coolant towers or any of the tricks we use on Earth. Heat can only escape through radiation, infrared light bleeding into the void. You need radiators the size of billboards, unfolding like metallic flowers, glowing dull red in the darkness. And then there was the voltage problem. To efficiently distribute that much power across the spacecraft, you needed high-voltage systems operating in the vacuum of space. Here's the nightmare. In a vacuum, electricity doesn't behave the way it does on Earth. Insulation that works perfectly in atmosphere becomes treacherous. Plasma interactions create unpredictable arcing. One wrong spark, one microscopic flaw in a wire's coating, and you could lose the entire power bus, turning your billion-dollar spacecraft into an expensive paperweight orbiting Jupiter, forever silent. The Department of Energy's Naval Reactors Laboratory was tasked with developing this megawatt-class reactor technology, but they were venturing into territory where the rulebook hadn't been written yet. New materials, new power management schemes. Everything was never before attempted. Every solution created 2 new problems. Every test revealed 3 new failure modes. Internal NASA meeting minutes from this period reveal something fascinating. The engineers weren't all singing from the same hymn sheet. Some pushed for incremental steps, technology demonstrators, proof-of-concept missions, anything to reduce the risk before betting everything on a flagship mission. We're chasing a dream that's too expensive and too risky, some argued in closed-door meetings. The technology just isn't there yet. Others argued the opposite. Go big or go home. Only an ambitious goal could justify the investment, could capture the public imagination, could secure the funding stream. These weren't just technical debates. They were philosophical disagreements about how NASA should operate in the post-Columbia era. Risk-averse versus risk-tolerant. Incremental versus revolutionary. The ghost of Challenger and Columbia haunted every conversation. How much risk was acceptable when the stakes were this high? The cost estimates reflected this uncertainty. $3 billion on the optimistic end, $10 billion on the pessimistic, $15 billion if things went really wrong. And here's what nobody outside the program really understood. Much of that uncertainty stemmed from the fact that they were developing not just a spacecraft, but an entire infrastructure. The reactor was designed to be modular, reusable for future outer solar system missions to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, worlds where sunlight becomes a distant memory, and nuclear power transforms from luxury to necessity. The innovations in radiator design, in heat pipe technology, in autonomous navigation, these were investments that could pay dividends across decades of exploration. But you had to survive long enough to prove the concept. You had to make it to the launch pad. By 2004, the National Research Council was sounding alarm bells. The technology wasn't mature, the timeline was unrealistic, and the cost? Well, the cost was about to become someone else's problem. Because NASA had a new priority, and it was wearing a very familiar face. Imagine you're a young engineer, fresh out of graduate school, joining NASA in 2003 with dreams of working on JIMO, the mission that would define your generation. You spend 2 years of your life designing radiation shielding systems, running simulations until 2 a.m., solving problems that have never been solved before. You're building something that will outlive you, that will answer questions humans have asked since we first looked up at the stars. Then you walk into work one morning in February 2005, and it's over. NASA officially canceled JIMO. The cancellation significantly impacted the team. The official reason? Budgetary constraints and programmatic priorities. Bureaucratic language for, "We found something more politically popular." The Constellation program had arrived. President Bush's grand vision to return humans to the moon and eventually Mars. Sound familiar? It should. It's the exact same script that killed Nerva 3 decades earlier. Sacrifice the distant science mission for the politically popular human spaceflight program. Boots on the ground sell better than robots in orbit. Flags and footprints win elections. The search for alien life in subsurface oceans? That's a harder story to tell in a 30-second campaign ad. For the younger engineers and scientists who had joined NASA specifically to work on JIMO, who'd turned down private sector jobs and relocated their families to chase this vision of nuclear-powered exploration, the professional and emotional heartbreak was acute. One moment you're designing humanity's first nuclear-powered tour of the outer solar system, solving problems that have never existed before. The next, you're updating your resume, watching years of work reduced to PDF files on a server nobody will ever access. By 2008, even the remnants of Project Prometheus, JIMO's parent program, were completely defunded. The nuclear dream was dead. Again. The cruel irony? Later studies showed JIMO's technology was actually feasible. NASA's kilopower reactor project in the 2000s proved the concept worked. Small nuclear reactors could operate reliably in space, providing kilowatts of continuous power for years. The engineering challenges that seemed insurmountable in 2005 were solvable. We could have had answers by now. We could have known whether life exists in Europa's ocean, whether Ganymede's subsurface sea harbors anything more than water and salt, whether Callisto's ancient ice holds secrets frozen since the solar system's birth. Instead, we're still waiting, still planning, still dreaming of missions that may never launch. All that remains of JIMO are dusty design documents, unused prototypes gathering dust in JPL warehouses, and a generation of scientists who wonder, what if? What if the funding had held? What if Constellation hadn't consumed NASA's budget like a black hole? What if we'd chosen the Hummingbird over the moon rocket? But the damage went deeper than individual careers or canceled hardware. JIMO's cancellation fundamentally altered NASA's institutional psychology. The agency became more skeptical of large, high-risk flagship missions, especially those dependent on immature technologies. the public and regulatory scrutiny of nuclear space propulsion intensified. Every future proposal would now carry the baggage of Project Prometheus, another expensive nuclear dream that never left the ground. NASA retreated to safer ground: modular development, incremental technology demonstrations, missions that could survive budget fluctuations without collapsing entirely. The era of betting everything on a single revolutionary spacecraft was over. The age of caution had begun. Yet here's where the story gets complicated, because JIMO didn't die without leaving fingerprints all over the future. The radiation shielding designs? They informed power systems for Artemis lunar habitats, protecting future astronauts from cosmic rays and solar storms. Those ambitious scientific goals and instrument concepts, they shaped Europa Clipper's entire mission architecture when it finally launched in 2024. The risk assessment frameworks developed for Prometheus became standard operating procedure for NASA's current nuclear thermal and nuclear electric propulsion initiatives aimed at getting humans to Mars in the 2030s. The innovations in heat pipe technology, autonomous navigation, and fault detection didn't vanish. They migrated, evolved, found new homes in missions that could actually fly. JIMO became a ghost, but a productive ghost, haunting every subsequent mission with whispers of what might have been and lessons about what not to do. Europa Clipper represents a different approach, utilizing solar power and flybys to mitigate the risks and costs associated with a nuclear-powered orbiter, like JIMO. It's solar-powered, not nuclear. It flies by Europa dozens of times instead of orbiting for years. It's safer, cheaper, more politically palatable. It's what you build when you've learned that sometimes good enough is better than perfect, if perfect means never launching at all. Here's the cruel irony. The Constellation program that killed JIMO canceled in 2010. 5 years of work, billions of dollars spent, and nothing to show for it except another lesson that apparently nobody learns. We traded the Hummingbird for a moon rocket that never flew, sacrificing the possible for the politically expedient. Meanwhile, the same type of reactor technology that could have unlocked the secrets of Europa in the 2010s is now being proposed again for Mars missions in the 2030s. We're still drawing the same blueprints, still having the same debates, still making the same promises. Different decade, different destination, same cycle. Initial enthusiasm, technical challenges, cost overruns, political shift, cancellation. The only question is whether this time will be any different. We began with the promise of a revolutionary spacecraft that would unlock the secrets of alien life. But we've discovered something far more sobering. The greatest barrier to space exploration isn't engineering, it's us. JIMO's failure wasn't about technology. The reactor could have worked, the shielding could have been built, the ion engines could have spiraled between those moons like a cosmic ballet. The science was sound, the engineering was feasible. The only thing that failed was our collective will to see it through when the political winds shifted. The same forces that killed NERVA in the 1960s killed JIMO in the 2000s, and they're still killing ambitious missions today. Until we solve the problem of political gravity, until we learn to commit to long-term scientific goals that outlast election cycles and budget negotiations, our boldest dreams will keep dying on the launch pad. Somewhere in the Jovian system, beneath miles of ancient ice, an alien ocean might be teeming with life, waiting for us to ask the question we've been too distracted to ask. JIMO could have given us the answer. Instead, it's just another ghost, haunting the graveyard of missions that could have changed everything. The technology was ready. The science was sound. We just weren't ready for ourselves. And that's the most terrifying discovery of all, that the final frontier isn't out there among the stars. It's right here, in the space between our ambitions and our willingness to pay for them, between what we dream and what we're willing to sacrifice to make those dreams real, between the Hummingbird we could have built and the compromises we chose instead. Europa Clipper launches in 2024, NASA's latest attempt to study Jupiter's icy moons, though without JIMO's nuclear power or ability to orbit multiple moons. Will it make it? Or will it join JIMO in the graveyard of canceled dreams? What mission do you think NASA should prioritize? And what would you be willing to sacrifice to make it happen? The cosmos is full of mysteries, but sometimes the biggest mystery is why we keep making the same mistakes. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more stories where history, technology, and human ambition collide. Thanks for watching.